Welcome back, MTN Giants Podcast, doing a Giants season preview for 2024. Preseason's over with, thank God. It wasn't that exciting. We saw the starters play in full for about a half versus the Texans, and it started off terrible, let's be honest. I mean, Jones had the awful interception, and the Giants were a laughingstock on social media. But I think the second quarter went much better, and I think people may have overreacted to how bad it was, but if you actually sat down and watched the whole game, or the whole first half, I should say, it really wasn't as bad as people made it sound. But anyway, the Giants going into 2024 have a win total of 6.5, and it's not where you want to be, of course. It's one of the lower win totals in the NFL. But can the Giants exceed that? We'll get into it in this video. Of course, leave a like, subscribe, comment your record prediction and all that. I'll get to my record prediction at the end of the video, and let's get into it. I think we'll start with the cuts and some of the more surprising ones. I'm not going to list everybody because it's a lot of names, but some of the more surprising cuts and ones that kind of jumped out at you. But Marcus McKeithen's gone. He was the 5th-round pick in 2022. He had 5 starts last year. Didn't go too well, and yeah, I mean, look, it's just not a good pick, obviously, looking back on it, but they took him as a bit of a project. It didn't work out. They gave him some time last year, of course, and, it is what it is. Joshua Kelly with the Chargers, former running back, he was cut. Jack Stoll from the Eagles, the signing they made in the offseason, he was cut. Isaiah Hodgins was cut but brought back to the practice squad. Of course, Hodgins, not much of a special teamer, so he's not really going to contribute there. Darian Beavers got cut. I feel bad about that one. I really thought he could be something his first year, and he got hurt in that last preseason game back in 2022, and he was looking good. So it was really sad how that happened, but I thought Beavers, if he stayed healthy, could have been something, so that's a shame. Darnay Holmes, the cornerback, he's been here for probably since 2019 or so. He's been here for a while. He was cut. He went to the Raiders and joins Patrick Graham, of course, who was his defensive coordinator for a couple years, so that's a nice way to get reunited there in Las Vegas. The Giants also cut wide receiver Allen Robinson, so it seemed like he was a bit of a long shot to make it. He went to the Lions practice squad, I believe, so good for him. Hopefully he makes some noise there. The Lions definitely need some receiver help because after Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra, there's not much there. Isaiah McKenzie, feel bad for him there. I mean, he had that muffed punt in the preseason. I think he recovered his own muffed punt, so it wasn't like it was the worst thing in the world, but had a foot injury that is a season-ending IR type of injury, so that sucks. I really was hoping that he would make it because him and Daves are very close from their days in Buffalo, but unfortunately not the case. Cornerback Trey Herndon, the veteran they got from Jacksonville, he did not make it. Miles Boykin, the wide receiver, Dante Miller, Lawrence Cager, those guys are back on the practice squad. I don't know about Miles Boykin, actually. Let me check. Yes, he is. So all 3 of those guys are just listed. Miller, Cager, Boykin, all back on the practice squad, so the Giants still technically have them. Some of the big injuries that we should watch out for going into week 1. Drew Lock has the hip injury. They've been saying for a while now he should be ready for week 1. He missed the final 2 preseason games, of course, but I'm assuming he'll be fine. I'm not in love with the Giants quarterback room. I'll be honest. We'll get to that point. But based on what Drew Lock looked like in the first preseason game, I know it was raining out, but it did not look great. Evan Neal with an ankle injury. I feel bad for Evan Neal, too. I feel bad for a lot of people here because it's like, it's your career on the line here. A lot of these guys were roster bubble guys, and you just feel bad. Evan Neal, not exactly a roster bubble guy, but once a 7th overall pick that right now, 2 years later, is not looking like the right pick. So I feel bad. His ankle injury is not that bad. They said it was a rolled ankle, and they believe he'll be fine, but he's not even slated to start right now. Of course, Jermaine Illuminor should be the right tackle week 1, so for Evan Neal, it may take an injury to earn some playing time, and maybe in the future they'll move him to guard. I'm surprised they didn't try it this offseason. I don't blame them per se, because if it was up to me, I would have given him one more shot to win the right tackle spot. Obviously, it didn't happen, so it is what it is. John Michael Schmitz, this was a scary one when it happened, but he had an ankle injury as well versus the Jets. There is no concern for week 1, hopefully. That's what he said at least. Cordell Flott with a quad injury was week to week, so I'm assuming he'll be fine for week 1. Micah McFadden is also week to week with a hip injury. I believe It may come down to the wire, but I think he should be okay for week 1, hopefully, and especially with the injuries behind him at linebacker, like Deontay Johnson with an ankle injury. That one sucks as well. I believe he went to IR. Yes, they put him to IR. They signed Curtis Bolton. We'll get to him later. Gunnar Olszewski seems like he'll be okay for week 1. They're saying he's hopeful, so I'm hoping that he is back there returning punts because not many guys are reliable in returning punts, obviously, on this team, so hopefully Gunnar is okay. We will start with the Giants offense, as I tend to do in every reaction video, so why not do it here? Brian Daboll seems to be calling the plays. He just won't come out and say it for some reason, but it seems like, based on what everybody's saying, is that Brian Daboll will be calling the plays this year. There was the whole thing last year against the Arizona Cardinals back in week 2, where people thought he took over play calling after halftime. It really seemed like he did. He would never fully admit it. Based on all reports that are coming out, it seems like Brian Daboll will be the play caller this year, which it's a bit odd. You know, it's like you had Kafka doing it for the first year and parts of last year, and now it's like fully on Daboll. It's just kind of weird how he kind of just took that power away. I mean, I get it because it's your 3rd year. You're a coach in New York. You don't want to be on the hot seat. If you're going to go down, you might as well do it yourself. So I kind of get it, but still, it's just weird how that whole thing transpired. The Giants were bottom 3rd last year in pass rate over expectation. That should change, in my opinion, with Saquon Barkley gone. It's great having a guy like Saquon, but at the same time, when you have a back as good as Saquon, you sometimes may force yourself to give him carries in situations where you wouldn't give a guy carries if you had a Devin Singletary type of running back. So there will be no forcing running back touches this year. They will probably be a more pass-happy offense this year. A big question is, will Daniel Jones run? Of course, he had 708 rushing yards in the 16 games back in 2022. Last year, before his injury, he was on pace for 144 carries, which is a lot. He had 120 back in 22. But does he trust his knee enough to run as much as he did? Did the Giants trust him enough to stay healthy to run him as much as they did? They obviously have a more competent backup. I shouldn't say more competent because Tyrod's better than Drew Lock, but they at least did something behind Daniel Jones to get Drew Lock, so maybe they're not going to be overprotective and actually let him run this time. As I said, he did it last year, but it obviously resulted in injury. Jones is not the best at sliding. We saw this in the preseason a few days ago, or a week ago, whenever it was, versus Houston, where he broke the pocket, ran for 12 yards. That was great, but he just didn't know how to slide, and he kind of just like stumbled over himself. So it's like always scary when he takes off, but I don't know. But will Daniel Jones be good in 2024 is a big question. For some people, it's reached a point where he is being underrated, and I somewhat agree with that. I think sometimes the Daniel Jones mockery is a bit much, and I'm at the forefront of it at most times, so I am guilty of it. But are we kind of forgetting if Jones can be somewhat good this year? And I think the truth may lie in the middle. I don't think he's probably not as bad as he was last year, but he's probably not as good as he was in 2022. So if he's somewhere in the middle, it's obviously not a great quarterback. It's not what you want for a franchise quarterback. But I don't think he'll be as bad as he was last year because that was very bad. And if he is that bad again, he'll probably be pulled pretty quickly. His passing props this year on betting sites, I forget which one this was, but they had him for 16.5 passing touchdowns, 2,800 passing yards. So if the line is set at 2,800 passing yards, they are obviously not planning on him playing for a full season. Obviously, if Jones were to start all 17 games, he would easily surpass the 2,800 passing yards, but these betting sites don't expect him to be the starter for the full year, whether that be due to injury or Drew Lock replacing him. If I had to guess, I don't think Jones lasts a full season either. I'd be a bit surprised. I do think it may get bad enough where the Giants coaching staff and even Joe Schoen maybe just wants a chance to see what this offense looks like with a different quarterback. I'm preparing myself for that. I'm not expecting Jones to come in here and have another 2022 type season, but I do think the leash will be shorter than ever for a guy like Jones this year. I feel like in the past, of course, his first couple years in the league, Jones was supposed to be the guy, and the backups were Mike Glennon and Jake Fromm and whoever else. They had Davis Webb back in 22. Shout out Davis Webb. We saw Tyrod play last year, of course, and I would say Tyrod did a good job. And it really made you realize, I think it made a lot of people kind of open their eyes and realize, wait, maybe it's not all the offensive line. Maybe it's not all the receivers. Like, maybe Daniel Jones could be playing better, because Tyrod came in and actually played pretty well at times under the same offense, same offensive line, same receivers. So I think Tyrod showed us last year, yeah, it's possible to put up points with this team. It's possible to have explosive plays with this team. So it sucks that we're sitting here wasting another year on Jones. I hate that, but, you know, when they sign him, it was a contract that you're not going to give up on after 1 year. So, you know, obviously based on Hard Knocks, they tried to trade up. Sadly, it didn't happen. And based on how good Drake May looked in preseason last time he played, it is pretty disappointing. So to sum that position group up, I am concerned about quarterback. It's probably the #1 concern on this team. Of course, cornerback too as well. We'll get there. If you don't have a quarterback, you really don't have anything. And it's kind of how the NFL works. So until the Giants get a good one, or one with a lot of potential, there's not much to look forward to. There are guys on this team that I'm looking forward to playing this year, but it's just when it's a quarterback, it's different. I mean, you guys know how it is. So it sucks, but hopefully this year is somewhat good from our quarterback position, but, you know, I just can't really sit here and expect it. For the running game, could the offensive line be better? It should. They made some off-season signings. Of course, they lost Saquon, but I do think a lot of running back success, as I've said since I've made this channel, depends on the offensive line. And is the box stacked? Do you have receivers on the outside that defenses have to worry about, which the Giants now have one? Do you have a quarterback that can read a defense? And if the box is not stacked and they're not blitzing, can you audible to a running play and things like that? So the running game is not all based on the running back himself. And I do believe that Singletary for his career has a higher yards per carry than Saquon Barkley. Obviously, Saquon's better. I'm not saying he's not. But Singletary is also a pretty decent back. He's an average starter. The guys behind him are not sure things. It's not like the Giants have a Trey Benson waiting behind him or someone like that. Not a Jonathan Brooks. They opted to go with a Tyrone Tracy, who they drafted this year, who of course was a wide receiver for most of his college career. But we saw Tracy play in the preseason, only had like 5 carries, but on those 5 carries, he forced 4 missed tackles. He looked really good. So his elusiveness is great, and I am looking forward to seeing Tyrone Tracy play this year. There was an injury scare a couple weeks ago. Thank God it wasn't too bad. He should be back playing for week 1. I think he returned to practice, so I really have no concerns about his injury right now. And even Eric Gray looked pretty good in preseason. It was a nice surprise. He had that great run, I think it was versus the Lions, where he broke that guy's ankles and took it to the house for like 54 yards. So maybe Eric Gray got better as well. The running back room, it's not spectacular. There's no big names here, but guys that can just get the job done. You have Singletary once again, who's been a pro. He's rushed for over 800 yards before. He's a solid running back. He's fine. He's not great, but he's fine. And then behind him, you have Tracy, who has the upside and could possibly be something, right? He's pretty old. He's 24, 25. Old for a running back, at least. I do think he could be a pretty good player in this league, so I'm looking forward to him as well. And then, as I mentioned, Eric Gray. Maybe Eric Gray can come in and be okay. Like, we saw some improvements, obviously, with Eric Gray's game in this preseason. For wide receivers, an interesting spot for the Giants here. Oh, there's a Schefter tweet. I gotta read this. Wow, Brandon Ayuk finally got the extension. It's about damn time. I don't know why teams do this to themselves. Like, you had Ayuk pretty much sit out the entire preseason and training camp. It's August 29th, a week before the year starts, and it's like, you could have just done this a couple weeks ago. I don't know. I know it's easier said than done, obviously, but good for them for getting it done. But the more you hold out, the better chance you have of getting injured with like a hamstring or something like that. So, I don't know. But hey, good for Brandon Ayuk and good for the 49ers. Anyway, for the Giants receivers, Malik Nabers was drafted 6th overall, and he was heavily targeted in the game versus the Texans. He made that really, I don't want to say like impossible catch, but it was a really impressive catch where he caught the ball, high pointed it, was able to pretty much toe drag on the sideline, get his feet in bounds. A catch that we really haven't seen since Odell left. It's been a while. I put Malik Nabers on the thumbnail of my fantasy football video. I am definitely all in on him this year, and I do think he'll have like 140 plus targets and have a great year. I do believe his receiving yards total on most betting sites, it's 875.5 yards, which I obviously think he'll exceed. It's going to take really, really bad quarterback play and an injury, of course, to not get Malik Nabers there. So hopefully he's healthy, and even if Jones is like trash, I still think he'll get there because he'll get benched. They'll put in Drew Lock. The one great thing about Drew Lock is he'll sling it. He don't care. So they'll get him his receiving yards and whatnot. So I'm not that concerned about it. For Nabers, if he were to come in here and have a fantastic rookie season, it would make things so much better. Because yeah, the Giants may only win 5, 6, or 7 games this year, but if you go into next offseason knowing that you have that wide receiver 1 alpha locked up for the next 4 or 5 plus years, that's a position you don't have to worry about, is finding your wide receiver 1, which obviously has been a giant concern for the Giants since Odell left once again. Hopefully Nabers is great. I think he will be. Wan'Dale Robinson enters year 3. He came back last year in year 2, coming off an ACL injury, and of course they say it takes a couple years to fully recover from that. So I like what I saw from Wan'Dale last year. It was a bit inconsistent, of course, and you know, with DeVito and the quarterback carousel last year, it definitely wasn't easy for him. But given the circumstances, I thought Wan'Dale had his moments. He should be in the slot hopefully most of the time, and he's very quick. He's a pretty good route runner, so I'm looking forward to him hopefully making a big impact this year. There is the Jalin Hyatt versus Darius Slayton debate, quote unquote. Slayton's in a contract year. I do think Slayton is a candidate to get traded at the deadline this year. And if I were the Giants, I would, because you're probably not going to re-sign him, especially with Nabers and now Hyatt and Wan'Dale, like 3 young receivers that are hopefully part of the future. There may not be need to have Darius Slayton here, so we'll see what they do. I do believe Hyatt should play more. I will say, like, Darius Slayton is the better player right now, but you have more invested in Jalin Hyatt. Like, you want Hyatt to work out. You traded up in the 3rd round to get Hyatt. Give him the snaps. If he fails, he fails, but this is not a team competing for a Super Bowl. I want to see Hyatt get those reps. There's no point in giving Darius Slayton in a contract year at 27 years old all the reps, if you ask me. I know him and DJ have a connection, but Jalin Hyatt, once again, is the future, hopefully. So I would give him the more snaps. Bryce Ford-Wheaton made the team. That was good to see. He tore his ACL last year in preseason, so bad timing for him, but he came back and got his body right, made the team, so that's great. I mentioned Isaiah Hodgins back on the practice squad. They will carry Gunnar Olszewski, of course, to return punts for the most part and maybe catch a couple passes this year. The tight end room is not too exciting. It was more exciting last year with Darren Waller, but you have Daniel Bellinger in year 3. You have rookie 4th-round pick Theo Johnson. He changed his number to 84. And by the way, they changed Malik Nabers to number 1, which was a retired number. And some people are really triggered by that. And personally, I don't really care. I mean, I have never seen Ray Flaherty play football in my life. He played in like the 20s and 30s. So no disrespect to him, but I don't know what he did or, you know, like it was so long ago, pre-Super Bowl era. Apparently, you know, Flaherty's family's fine with it. So it's like, all right, well, what's the big deal? So I don't know. I'm not really like that triggered about it. Now, if someone came in and wore number 10, I probably would feel a certain type of way about that, you know? But, like, it's just a number. I get it, but just having grown up and watching Eli, if, like, the Giants had gotten Drake May and they gave him number 10, I probably wouldn't love it, so I get it, but, like, I don't know. Like, the Flaherty stuff was so long ago. I know that's a bad excuse to make, but whatever. I'm not going to get off topic. Theo Johnson, once again, out of Penn State. I was a big fan of his pre-draft. Very happy the Giants got him. Didn't do much in the preseason, but, like, he wasn't really given much of a chance anyway, and he kind of battled an injury for a bit. Chris Manhertz is also still here as a blocking tight end. He's been around for a while with Denver, Jacksonville, and mostly Carolina throughout his career. I think maybe Dave Gettleman drafted him, now thinking about it. If he was drafted, I don't think he was. But yeah, he probably was signed by Gettleman. That's kind of funny. Anyway, but he is 6'6", 235. He will not really do much in terms of catching the ball, but hopefully can be a good run blocker for this team this year. So as I said, not the most exciting room for the tight ends, but Theo Johnson's a guy that I'm going to be watching closely this year, and hopefully he does have a breakout rookie season. I'm not going to put the highest of expectations on him, but there is a chance that he does have a nice year, and there's a reason I liked him. He has the size to be NFL ready. I think he's a good enough blocker. The receiving is not elite, but he can catch a ball up the seam and outrun guys. He's actually pretty fast for his size. He's not shifty. He's not going to be he's not going to be like a Jordan Reed or something after the catch, or someone like that, like a nifty tight end, but he can do some of what old school tight ends do and hopefully do it at a high level. For the Giants offensive line, it should be better. You know, I kind of feel a little nervous saying that because I feel like we've said that for so many off seasons, but you do have Carmen Bricillo as an offensive line coach, who I would say the Raiders offensive line exceeded expectations and outplayed their talent. So I'm hoping that him doing that in Las Vegas, he can do that in New York/New Jersey. So we'll see if he can, and the Giants did bring in some offensive line help. Of course, Jon Runyan from the Packers, and they brought in Jermaine Illuminor from the Raiders. The pass blocking offensive line versus Houston with the starters in, they looked really good in pass protection, right? I mean, the run blocking was like okay, but the pass blocking looked great. So if it looks like that for most of the year, we should be fine. They did have some bad moments versus the Jets, but there were only I think only JMS was playing. Of course, Evan Neal was too, but he's not a starter technically. But that was Tommy DeVito, who holds the ball way too long, so take that into consideration as well. But I am happy with an offensive line coach change. It just depends, is this the right hire? And we'll see. But I do think they have enough talent to make it work, right? Just looking on paper, an offensive line of Andrew Thomas, who's one of the better left tackles in football, Jon Runyan at left guard, John Michael Schmitz, who, yes, is in his second year and has a lot to prove, but he was a second-round pick. At right guard is a little I don't know, it could be Greg Van Roten, it could be Aaron Stinney. I think Greg Van Roten seems like the favorite, so we'll see. Maybe one day Evan Neal will get that shot at right guard. I don't know. But the right guard spot, probably the more concerning part on this offensive line, or most concerning, I should say. And then at right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor. With that offensive line, it's really not that bad. Talent-wise, as I said, if you had a terrible offensive line coach, it may look terrible. But assuming Carmen Bricillo actually looks good, which I do think he'll do a good job here, hopefully, then this offensive line shouldn't be that bad. And having a quarterback like Daniel Jones or Tommy DeVito, a guy who doesn't read a defense too well and holds on to the ball for way too long, it doesn't help the situation. So I feel bad for the offensive line in that regard. If they had a quarterback that was better at reading defenses and finding their hot route and just getting rid of the ball quicker, it would be a better situation overall. But, Daniel Jones has to be better in that regard. It's year 6, 7, whatever it is for him. So he has to be better at reading a defense and knowing where the blitzes are coming from. There was the play versus Seattle where they brought in that corner blitz or the slot corner blitz, and he had no idea it was coming. I believe it was on his strong side too, so it's crazy. So things like that you can't be oblivious to, especially this deep into Daniel Jones's career. So hopefully he's better with that. But overall for the offensive line, I think they have a chance to be league average, which would be a pretty nice bump up from where they usually are. Realistically speaking, they may be from that 20 to 25 range amongst the NFL offensive lines, but even then, it's not great, but it's better than it was, so I guess I'll take that. For the Giants defense, we'll get into Shane Bowen, who they hired as the defensive coordinator. Of course, the whole Don Martindale thing did not end too well. But for Shane Bowen, they bring him over from the Titans, of course, and he runs a lot more zone than the Giants have been playing. There won't be as much blitzing, which was Don Martindale's MO. There will be more too high safety looks. The defensive line is going to be expected to win their 1v1 matchups, their one-on-one matchups, and the Giants luckily have the personnel to do that on the defensive line, which is probably the best position group on this team. We'll get to that. The secondary, of course, since they'll be in zone, they could benefit from reading a quarterback's eyes and trying to jump passing routes, and a guy like Tyler Nubin, who has great instincts and anticipation, is a great fit for this defense, so I'm looking forward to him. And they do take the nickel corner position serious in this defense. They want a guy who not only can be quick and handle some tough slot receivers, but also be tough in the box and make plays against the run. They expect that out of a guy like Drew Phillips, or it might be Isaiah Simmons. I don't know about that, but we'll see. But Drew Phillips especially, a guy that is tough in the run game. That's why they probably made that pick. It was a great scheme fit for this Shane Bowen defense. For the defensive line specifically, as I said, it's probably the strength of this team. They have 3 guys that can all flirt with like 8+ sacks. I would say Thibodeaux and Brian Burns. Those guys can get somewhere from 12 to 16 sacks probably, and Dexter Lawrence can get 6 to 8. Like, they have that upside, of course. Dexter is 26 years old this year. And with Aaron Donald retired, he might be the best defensive tackle in football, maybe. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but he really might be. So, yeah, he's been an amazing pick, obviously, and a cornerstone for the Giants. Kayvon Thibodeaux, he enters a big year 3. We have to see more consistency. He had 7 of his 11.5 sacks in just 3 games last year. So he had his monster game last year. I remember the game versus the Jets. He was phenomenal, but, like, just too many games where you're like, oh, is Kayvon playing? Like, just, you know what I mean? So, more consistency for sure. They bring in Brian Burns from the Panthers, a trade, a 2nd and a 5th round pick, give him the huge contract. Joe Schoen's putting a lot of faith in Brian Burns. And ultimately, the Giants made a decision in the offseason. It was pretty much either re-sign McKinney or get the pass rusher and bring in Burns, and they chose Brian Burns. So, if Burns comes here and is not that good and McKinney thrives in Green Bay, which I think he will, it's not going to be a good look. So hopefully Brian Burns comes in here and looks great. I've always been a Brian Burns fan. I know we were 1 pick away from him in that 2019 draft. It was disappointing, but we did get Dexter Lawrence once again, so it's not the worst thing. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot to give up, of course, but hopefully Brian Burns works out here. It's exciting to have an edge room this talented, so we'll see. For the Giants defensive tackles, it's going to be Raheem Nunez-Roches once again. They have Jordan Riley behind him. They have Elijah Chapman, who made some noise in the preseason, mainly for chasing down that running back, which was really impressive in the Texans game. For a guy that big, it was good stuff and a lot of effort. So Elijah Chapman could get some snaps this year. It's going to be pretty fun to watch him and see what he can do. Can he make an impact? DJ Davidson made the team, which I don't know if that's a surprise, but he made the team, so he's there. I've never been a big fan of his, but like he's still here. I would give Chapman a nod over him, but we'll see what they do. Boogie Basham and Azeez Ojulari will be your rotational edge guys for the most part. Of course, they brought in Basham last year in the preseason. Didn't do a whole lot. Azeez Ojulari in a contract year. Actually, both guys, Basham and Ojulari, they were both 2021 draft picks. They're in contract years, so big years for those guys. Can Azeez stay healthy and put up a 5 or 6 sack season? That'd be great. But so far, he has not been able to stay on the field for the most part. But this defensive line / edge group in general, as I said, probably the best part of this team. And I'm excited for it. And it kind of gives you some flashbacks to the Giants of old. I'm not going to compare them exactly because that shouldn't be compared. But, you know, you start thinking about the Justin Tuck and OC and JPP, Strahan, like those teams. You start thinking about that and like, man, if like we hit our 99th percentile outcome here, like maybe those guys can do what they did. I don't think we have the same team we did back then, unfortunately. Back in 2007 and 2011, we don't have the offense that those teams had. We don't have Eli Manning, but still, to have a great defensive line once again, a thing that made Giants football great when I was growing up and became a Giants fan, it's good to see that. So hopefully this defensive line can really wreak havoc in certain matchups and make a quarterback's life hell. For the linebacker position, it is a bit top-heavy with Bobby Okereke being the main guy, and thank God we got him. That was a great signing, by the way. It's worked out perfectly so far. I don't want to get too ahead of myself because Blake Martinez in his first year looked like a stud and then, you know, took a big step back. So, maybe it's going to work out the same way. But no, I do like Okereke, and that so far, once again, worked out perfectly. Micah McFadden behind him. And McFadden did have a really good year last year, and it was a nice surprise. I just wonder if this scheme change will change how Micah McFadden is used, which it probably will, and how he ultimately plays. So he may be asked to go in coverage more, where he's struggled a bit in coverage. He's also missed a lot of tackles. He missed 17, almost 18% of his tackles last year, McFadden, so that is a concern. They did sign Curtis Bolton, who was just cut by Miami. I guess with Deontay Johnson going on IR, they replaced him ultimately with Curtis Bolton, who should be a special teams player for the Giants. And Bolton did have an 87 PFF grade in the 2024 preseason, so that's nice. They drafted Darius Muasau, I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, out of UCLA, late pick. He looked pretty good in preseason at times. Of course, he's going to be more of a special teams guy right off the bat. But if injuries were to happen and things like that, he may get a shot. And maybe he'll be good. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect from him. But right now, at least, just a special teamer. You have Isaiah Simmons, who is technically listed at nickelback, but obviously could be a linebacker as well. Versatile player. And they did mention him as a nickelback on defense, or on Hard Knocks. Well, obviously defense, but yes, on Hard Knocks, they alluded to that. Isaiah Simmons will probably have a couple of different roles this year. He'll be a nickelback at times, and he'll be just a regular inside linebacker. But ultimately, I'm happy they brought him back. I like having a guy like Simmons on this team. For cornerback, we have Deonte Banks in his second year, age 23 season. You have to wonder, will the scheme change hurt him? When he was drafted, he was more known for being a good man-to-man corner, being physical, having the great size for a cornerback one. When you put him in zone more often, how does that affect Deonte Banks' game? That's to be determined. I still think he'll be fine. I'm hoping he'll be the cornerback one of the future, but this is a big year too for him. Banks allowed a 55% completion rate last year and did have 2 interceptions, so I would say it was a pretty good rookie season for the most part. The cornerback 2 spot is very concerning. Our general manager, Joe Schoen, is not that concerned about it based on what he said yesterday, but I think me and plenty of other fans of this team are concerned about it. They do have Cordell Flott to play that position, which he was drafted to be a slot corner, so they'll put him outside, and he did play outside a good amount his rookie year, but played a lot more in the slot last year, so it's kind of weird how they did it like that, but they'll put Flott on the outside this year. Maybe it works out. Nick McLeod will also factor in as a cornerback too. He'll be competing, and I kind of liked what I've seen from Nick McLeod the past couple years. I've been pleasantly surprised, so if I had to choose right now, I'd probably pick McLeod to be my pick for cornerback too, but once again, we'll see how it plays out. They drafted Drew Phillips in the 3rd round. He'll be the primary nickel corner. He's a good tackler for his size, a high-intensity player. I think he'll fit in well with this defense. And, some people who really study the draft said it was a kind of a reach for a 3rd-round pick, but I don't know. I think he's going to work out here. I don't know if he'll reach like star heights and be regarded as one of the better cornerbacks in football, but I do think he can really be a good starter for this team for a while, so I hope it works out. Trey Hawkins III is still here. Of course, he played a little bit last year, had a lot of hype. He was the 2023 6th rounder. I can't say I have much confidence in him, but we'll see how his second year in the league goes. I'm still curious why they haven't signed Adoree Jackson. Adoree is still unsigned. I saw the Browns were maybe looking into him, but he's still right now a free agent. He turns 29 soon, but I thought Adoree was fine last year. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible either. So maybe they just want to get younger. Joe Schoen, as I said, feels good about the cornerback 2 spot. I don't know if I agree necessarily, but hopefully he's right. For the safety position, Tyler Nubin is the 2nd-round pick out of Minnesota. He played 55 games in college. As I said, instinctual player, good anticipation. He had 12 interceptions the past 3 seasons at Minnesota, and he will look to make up for the loss of Xavier McKinney, which I'm sure he will not be able to do as a rookie, but hopefully in the next couple years, he'll kind of fit in nicely and be regarded as one of the better safeties in football. The McKinney loss, it sucks, obviously, and as I said before, they kind of had to pick between him and Brian Burns, and they chose Brian Burns, so it was nice that Nubin somewhat, I don't want to say fell to them in round 2, but it was nice that Nubin was there in round 2 and they were able to get him. Obviously, losing a talent like McKinney, it's never easy. So I'm just hoping that the rookie Nubin can step in and play some good football for them. Jason Pinnock will be opposite of him starting. And honestly, I thought Pinnock was pretty good last year. Of course, we remember him from the interception versus the Dolphins. It was like 105 yards to the house. That was great. They did lose that game, but still. But I thought he was underrated last year. I think, Pinnock was a guy picked up last year from the Jets, and there wasn't much thought put into it. But the more he played, I was like, oh, this guy's really not that bad. So I do hope he is able to maintain a starting role this year. He should. I don't love what's behind him. That brings us to Dane Belton, 23 years old, doesn't have the greatest numbers and coverage so far in his young career. He did have the injury when he first came over with the shoulder, but since then he's been healthy, so that's good. They did waive Javarius Owens, the 7th-round pick from 2023, and now there's a lot of controversy around that because some beat writers were saying he made the team, and then some were like, no, he didn't. So ultimately, he did get cut. So kind of feel bad for Javarius Owens. But they did, however, claim safety Anthony Johnson from the Packers, who was a 7th-round pick for them in 2023. He'll pretty much replace what Javarius Owens was supposed to be. Hopefully he plays special teams and he's still a young player, so we'll see if Anthony Johnson can make an impact for this secondary. But ultimately, the secondary is a bit concerning. I'm kind of sitting here expecting Nubin to be great right away. Maybe not great, but at least be a pretty good starter. And maybe my expectations are a bit too high. Maybe I should kind of dial it back a bit. The only real proven guy we have in our secondary is maybe 1 year from Deonte Banks. We saw Pinnock last year, but, aside from that, it's like there's a lot of unproven guys in this secondary in a passing league. So it's going to be a bit concerning in this secondary, but if the front four is great, which hopefully they are, then I guess it won't matter as much, and it'll make the secondary's job easier. So we'll see how this defense plays out. It's going to be interesting with a new defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, once again. How did they perform? In 2022 with Martindale, they really performed well. I think in every game but one that they won in 2022, so 8 of their 9 wins, the defense held opponents under 21 points. So that was great. Of course, last year was a step backwards, and there was a lot of turmoil, of course, with Martindale and Brian Daboll. So hopefully cooler heads prevail this time around with Shane Bowen. So overall, my thoughts for this team, and of course the final record prediction. It's not the most exciting Giants season. I've definitely been more excited for other seasons in the past. And this team has had double-digit losses in 6 of the past 7 seasons. It's been rough here, of course, and we just keep waiting for that season that's going to really give us some hope for the future. Some people thought 2022 was that year, and I kind of did myself, but I also knew like they did get lucky that year. They were crazy good in one-score games, and a lot of times that flips in reverse, and we saw how that went last year. And on paper, this team is like, it's not great. I would say it's not even a top 20 team in the NFL, but there is some talent here, and they need some of these Joe Schoen draft classes to start hitting, right? Like if Thibodeau looks great this year, that'll go a long way, but so far these draft classes have not looked tremendous. They've had some picks that have looked good, but for the most part as a whole, the draft classes so far have not been great. So we'll see how the 2022 and 2023 and of course this 2024 rookie class of Joe Schoen's looks this year. Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen's job security, that could be in question if things get off to a bad start. And I do think the early season schedule is very important for this team. You start off versus Minnesota. I think the Vikings are 1-point favorites, but that game really is a coin flip. Then you have Washington on the road in week 2. So 2 winnable games to start the year. If they were to start 0-2 and then go on to play tougher teams and really get in the hole, the seats will get warm for, of course, Daboll and Schoen. Now, I do ultimately think they will survive this year, but with a bad season again this year, it makes year 4 for them next year a really critical season. And if they get off to a bad start next year, then, the leash may be pretty short. So not like the Giants are a team that likes to fire coaches and GMs mid-season, but I've seen it before in my lifetime, of course, 2017. So nothing will surprise me at this point. But as I said, I think the first 2 games will really show us what this team's made of. if the Giants suck this year and Saquon Barkley's going off in Philly and McKinney looks great in Green Bay and they're playing for good teams, it's like, how's John Mara going to view that, you know? Like, obviously, if we watch Hard Knocks, John Mara did not want to let go of Saquon Barkley. And while I'm happy he didn't get his way, because I don't really see the point of having Saquon anymore on this team, it's still John Mara's opinion. So if the guy that he wanted to be a Giant goes to Philly, a rival, and looks great, and the Giants suck, it's like, how's John Mara going to view that whole thing? So I kind of fear for Joe Schoen in that regard. The rumors are already starting about the Giants getting Dak Prescott in 2025, so that's going to be fun to look forward to this year. If the Cowboys don't look great, which I think the Cowboys will take a small step back this year, I don't really love their offseason, and the Giants aren't good, it's going to be a lot of Dak to New York talk over the season, so that should be fun. Now, my final record prediction for 2024 for the Giants is going to be 6-11. It's not great. It's definitely not great. I forget what I said last year. I might have said 8 wins or something. I forget. Of course, they fell a bit short there. But I think 6-11 is fair. They're over under 6.5. I just don't love this quarterback room. I really don't. I wish I felt better about it. Not a Daniel Jones guy, of course. I don't really have faith in him at all. He might be decent, but I've seen enough at this point. I know who he is. Drew Lock, maybe. I just don't think he's much better, if at all. So that whole situation's bad. The whole, like, having Brian Daboll is great because Brian Daboll at least gives them a floor of like 4 or 5 wins. Like, I can't see a Giants team winning like 2 or 3 games with Brian Daboll. He's too good of a coach. But the talent on this team it's not great. So I'm just hoping that somehow they have another 2022 type year where things break right and they somehow win 8-9 games and get into the playoffs and maybe get a favorable opponent once again. But ultimately, you know, the ceiling for this team is probably the divisional round, which if this team made it that far, I guess it'd be a nice accomplishment. But sitting here now, I don't feel great about it. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs, but you know, I could be proven wrong. We'll see how it goes. And as I said, the first 2 weeks will tell us a lot. So, of course, throughout the season, I'll be making my game reactions. Might do game previews, may not. Still thinking about it. So, we'll see. Let me know in the comments. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Once again, leave your record predictions in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time.